of July 15th. I'm going to shoot for July 16th on the Tuesday, just so that everybody's clear. Okay, those are the date. That's the date that I'm going to propose to the witnesses. Okay, so it falls falls within the scope of the motion, and I'll do it in the morning as well. Okay, just to be clear, that's the offer that's going to go out. Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move a motion.
Go ahead.
That notwithstanding the week of July 16th, as per the usual practice of the House of Commons, standing committees, that the Standing Committee for Ethics shall not meet during Parliament's summer recess unless the requirements of the 106.4 of the standing orders are met.
He just doesn't want to work. He really doesn't want to work in the summer.
July 16th. The 15th is the Monday. So, right?
It doesn't even have to be in the motion. I'm just saying that
okay. All right.
I'm accepting that week because of the work we just did.
Okay. We're in committee business. The motion is in order. Debate. Mr. Green, anything to say?
I think the motion is self-explanatory.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Mr. Barrett, go ahead.
Chair, I think it's important that we recognize that the standing orders of the House allow for chairs of committees to use their prerogative to call meetings when necessary and within the mandate of the committee. I think that as a opposition chaired committee, that it's incredibly important that this is an accountability committee, and so often we see that. There are members who don't recognize the need for all members, all backbenchers, to hold the government to account. And that term, I mean members on all sides of the House need to make sure that the executive is kept in check. And so when the standing orders have been adopted by the House and allow for the chair of a committee to call a meeting, that the committee not act contrary to those standing orders of the House. It's a power that is used sparingly or rarely, but I think that it's important that it's one that's preserved. And when we look at the work that this committee has done, and you look at the issues that have been in front of this committee, whether it's the $60 million Arrive scam and and a government that says there's nothing to see here, there's no this was necessary in the context of the pandemic, and therefore all expenses were justified, and everyone should move on. It's taken incredible lifts by committee and an awful lot of energy just to get committees to lift this off the ground. And once it's off the ground, we seem to find new information that is revealing to this government's lack of respect or fiduciary responsibility for Canadians. We have $60 million, and on an app that saw massive subcontracting, 30% of those subcontracted fees were for people who did no work on the app, and that is that's not acceptable, especially in the context of Canadians who are struggling to pay their bills and struggling to just get by. And this committee has been seized with on multiple occasions ethical scandals involving the Prime Minister. Again, important work done by this committee, whether it was the Trudeau Report 1, where the Prime Minister was found guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act, and the not just in one instance, but multiple sections. I think 4 sections of the Act for illegal vacations taken to Billionaire Island, where he was joined by the then president of the Liberal Party, who's now a Liberal MP, was joined by the Labour minister, and joined by Mr. Pitfield, the gentleman who he just relieved of a real estate burden at taxpayer expense. That came from the work of this committee, that we were able to expose and challenge the narrative that the government was putting forward. Again, with the Trudeau 2 report, much work was done at this committee. And the ability of the chair to call meetings outside of the regularly scheduled slots is sometimes necessary in order to fulfill our mandate. In that case, it was the Conflict of Interest Act again, and it was the Prime Minister who was found to have interfered in the criminal prosecution of SNC Lavalin, a firm that had illegally funded the Liberal Party of Canada, but also was found guilty of bribing Libyan officials in the Gaddafi regime to the tune of $48 million, defrauding the Libyan people of more than $100 million. And we saw related, of course, to the Prime Minister, but the Trudeau 3 report, where another member of the Prime Minister's cabinet, in that case, his then Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, was found guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act. These are part of these issues are part of the work of this committee, and the $1 billion Green Slush Fund, because we're not duplicating the work of other committees, it's being addressed at the Industry Committee, but is also seen hearings here and government operations, I think public accounts. But this was important for this committee to introduce, examine, and then for the committee to get ultimately got housed elsewhere. But when important issues come forward, the committee needs to be able to do its work. And that's what the standing orders allow for. It's not infrequent that we find ourselves dealing with issues that touch on members of the executive and their obligations having been breached, and what that looks like in terms of the erosion of Canadians' confidence in our public institutions. The president of the King's Privy Council was found, Minister LeBlanc, was found guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act and claim scam. It was lucrative contracts that went to a family member of the minister's spouse. Again, work that's not part of the scheduled work plan, but needs to be part of the consideration for when the chair exercises his role in calling meetings. But Minister LeBlanc was found guilty of breaking the act in that case, not part of our regular work plan. I mentioned previously former Liberal Finance Minister Bill Morneau, sometimes referred to as Bill No More, having broken the Conflict of Interest Code and the Conflict of Interest Act. And The code violation was, of course, the forgotten French villa. Who among us hasn't forgotten to declare their French villa? And with respect to the scandal, the WE scandal involving the $1 billion Canada Student Service grant going to Justin Trudeau's buddies, the Kielburgers, Bill Morneau was found guilty of breaking the act 3 times for his private interests and failing to recuse himself from decisions relating to the WE organization. And I should circle back to Minister LeBlanc, because we hear from, as part of the mandate of this committee, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Now, when the Commissioner Dion resigned and his role wasn't filled, the government, of course, appointed an interim commissioner. And that interim commissioner was the sister-in-law of the minister, and Minister LeBlanc. That's part of our role, is to hold the government accountable, because the appearance of a conflict can be as damaging as a real conflict. And for the appointee and the minister to say, oh well, we weren't involved in the decision, but what does it look like to the public? And that's what we talk about here, and that's what we examine here at this committee. Of course, when we have the regular work plan for the committee, the regular sitting calendar for the committee. Sometimes we're able to insert items into that. Sometimes we have meetings that are called pursuant to Standing Order 1064, where we can deal with an issue. But we also had the issue of Trade Minister, Liberal Trade Minister Mary Ng, who was found guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act, Sections 6, Section 21, and this was when she gave her best friend, Amanda Alvaro, contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars, not tendered, but just she had a comfortable relationship with a Liberal insider, a former Liberal staffer, and thought, you know what, this is the right fit for me. She was unconcerned about the not just the appearance, but also the reality of that for taxpayers. Would she have spent tens of thousands of dollars on that service if it wasn't to her friend? Would Canadians have been on the hook for that expense when she already had ministry staff and member staff to fulfill that function? We had and it's interesting now because the Speaker is an elected Liberal member, but he was then the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister and Parliamentary Secretary to President of the Treasury Board, and he was found guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act, using his position to try and influence the CRTC, and to the benefit of a personal interest of his. This is something that is important. I mean, the now Speaker, the then Liberal Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Fergus, was a member of this committee. But once you have that role, once you swear that oath, it's the responsibility of all parliamentarians to make sure that that accountability function is being exercised, because it's what Canadians expect. And the standing orders allow for chairs, not just of opposition-chaired committees, but of government-chaired committees as well, to do certain things, to bring a meeting, to schedule a meeting, to call the meeting to order, to suspend the meeting, to adjourn the meeting, and to respond to those 1064, Standing Order 1064 meeting requests. And we see Government chairs and opposition chairs have employed all of those powers to call meetings outside of the regular time. We know that there have been instances where it's been essential that this committee step up and respond to something that's in the public interest at that time, and to examine the issue. And sometimes where there's smoke, the fire's gone out, but sometimes we find out that where there's smoke, there's actually an inferno. And that is very often the case. And I would be uncomfortable to abdicate my responsibility as an opposition member to not have the tools in the toolbox available, and for the chair to call a meeting, and for me not to be there or have someone there in my place. I don't want to presuppose what the next 90 days are going to bring, because I don't know. And every time I think that there's going to be nothing that touches the mandate of this committee during a recess period, we find we find ourselves unpleasantly disappointed to see that we have to come back and deal with an issue that has cropped up with, and the appearance of a conflict can even rise to that test. We saw an example of that. We saw an example of that over January, where the Prime Minister ended up taking another one of his vacations at a luxury resort, and did so. Yes, there was great expense to taxpayers for the Prime Minister's security, but it was also a gift, and the stay at this luxury resort. But what does that look like to Canadians when someone who's involved in the Trudeau Foundation, which of course is an issue that we've examined at this committee, and the Trudeau Foundation's many ties to the government? This is a Trudeau Foundation booster or member who's giving the Prime Minister a substantial gift. We need to be able to exercise our mandate, and so I'm not comfortable with the limiting of. I'm not comfortable with the limiting of powers that are afforded under the standing orders. I'm not actually sure that that by motion at committee that we can do that. I would be interested to hear from someone from the law clerk's office, if there is any precedence for committees limiting powers that are given under the standing orders. We can pass whatever motions that we want, but what is the effect? What is the force of that motion? So I'm not comfortable with this, and I'm curious if there's any nuance that's available, because we've just had a case that demonstrates why it may be necessary to have meetings, and that's the hearings with Ms. Poon and Mr. Anderson with respect to Liberal Minister Randy Boissonnault's involvement with those two companies, and the questions that have come up about that. And
Where's
that's
Randy?
pushed our agenda now into July. And so it's important that we keep all of the tools that are available to us in the toolbox. I think it's an open question whether or not this is a power that the committee has to limit powers that are given under the standing orders. So I'll take a look at the motion. Listen to what the other members have to say, if anyone else has anything to say about it, and but just at first blush, I'm just based on the important work that we have done, the work that we can do. I don't think that I'm comfortable supporting this motion.
Thing is, it's a Liberal NDP majority committee.
Mr. Barrett, I have a list.
They can just adjourn the meeting.
Includes Mr. Brock,
Just vote for
next,
it,
Cooper,
and they'll adjourn the meeting.
Ms. Damoff, Mr.